Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You stated in your testimony that the minister lied when he said he was first briefed about the RCGT fact-finding report. At committee, the minister was very clear that he first learned about wrongdoing, conflicts, and mismanagement at SDTC. But that would not be correct, would it?
Probably not. Again, what did George Chahal say to him? You have to ask him.
You referenced that there was an interim RCGT report that contained many of the findings that ultimately made its way into the RCGT report that was issued in October. The interim report was written in May, and that the department was going to undertake or establish a directorate to undertake a series of investigations. I presume the minister would have been briefed in or around May about that interim RCGT report. Is that correct?
Correct. And the recordings showed that the deputy minister and the ADM had plans to speak to the minister around the findings, at which point the following week everything suddenly changed, and now they needed more time and expansion of timing. I would say I myself was personally given the full verbal debrief by RCGT over a 2-hour period on exactly what the findings were at that point. So again, I think I maybe want to mention that the 37 hours that I'm talking about, this isn't, they integrated me into every aspect of the investigation. I don't know why, but they did. No. Okay. So the information I'm providing, okay, I'm factually telling the truth because it's all validated.
Thank you, because the minister never mentioned anything about an interim report. He never mentioned anything about being briefed in May or June. He led a parliamentary committee to believe that he first learned about the findings of wrongdoing in September, and you said a year ago, or nearly a year ago, that he lied, and I presume it was in that context, but you said he lied. Is that correct?
At that part and the part about the fact that he said he had no no say in that final recommendation, but again, there's evidence to the contrary showing that before he was actually given the recommendation, him and his office had actual verbal conversations with the ADM and the deputy minister to ask for changes on those reports and the recommendation prior to its official submission. And I would also say that the most indicative aspect of the situation that I said and the cover-up is the fact that the deputy minister is actually retiring.
So, in short, the minister was in the thick of it. He was actively involved. He was learning about information around wrongdoing. He was being briefed, and he was actively, along with his deputy minister, involved in saying, we want to change this, we want to change that, we want to soften the report throughout until it was released in October. Is that a fair characterization of what happened?
That's fair, and it's not just the minister, it's PCO and the Department of Justice, because again, there were implications immediately when the investigation started in March because these were PCO appointees.
Who in PCO and Justice was involved in this corrupt editing process along with the minister?
ADMs.
ADM Noseworthy?
No, he wasn't involved in any investigation because he was implicated. What I meant was ADMs and people of that level as counterparts to the people at ISED were involved from day one.
Would it be fair to characterize that the conduct of the minister was corrupt?
Yeah. I mean, embarrassing at minimum.
Deceitful?
Yeah.
You also said last year and today that there was a consensus amongst bureaucrats at ISED that the board needed to go. But that changed when the minister intervened. Why did Minister Champagne go against the advice of his officials and politically interfere to keep the SDTC board, the conflicted board that had doled out hundreds of millions of dollars improperly, to keep that board in place? Why?
Because I think that the current government is more interested in protecting themselves and protecting the situation being a public nightmare and they would rather protect wrongdoers and financial mismanagement than have to deal with a situation like STDC in the public sphere.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please. This will be your last slot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During this so-called cleanup period at SDTC, updated contribution agreements have been completed. You indicated in your testimony that the effect of these contribution agreements is to make retroactive what were previously ineligible or conflicted projects eligible. To be clear, these contribution agreements, these updated contribution agreements, are prepared by ICIT. Is that correct?
Yes.
And they would have to be signed off by the minister, Minister Champagne, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Astounding. The Auditor General found, turning to COVID relief bonuses and payments, the Auditor General found that the SDTC board improperly approved $38.5 million in so-called COVID relief payments. In addition, the Auditor General found that in blatant conflicts of interest, board members voted to funnel millions of dollars of these payments into their own companies 63 times, 63 conflicts of interest, and the SDTC board chair, Annette Verschaeren, was found guilty of violating the Conflict of Interest Act by the Ethics Commissioner for funneling nearly $220,000 of these payments into her own company. These payments were approved days before the end of fiscal year 2019-20 and 2020-21, correct?
Correct.
Is it correct that board members and executives were incentivized with bonuses if SDTC met certain funding goals in a fiscal year, in other words, getting money out the door?
Correct.
I would note that immediately prior to the approval of the so-called COVID relief payments in both fiscal years, SDTC had fallen short of meeting its funding goals. Is it fair to say that this nearly $40 million improper COVID giveaway had an impact on bonuses that board members received?
Can I say more than just correct?
Yes.
A lot of this COVID relief payments, it's not just a conflict of interest. They could have approved this payment, and that would have just it would have provided more of the funding that was already pre-approved. So all you were doing was adding in 5% that was already provided. For these COVID payments, they added additional 5%. So this is where they went above and beyond the logic of what you should have been doing, because even if the companies had a problem, you could have just provided them more of what was provided already, but instead they chose to add additional components of funding that never met any eligibility.
Right. And did that impact their bonuses?
Exactly.
Yes.
It impacted their bonuses.
So essentially, let me just clarify, if you would agree, board members voted to improperly funnel money out the door, including into their own companies, so that they could then turn around and pad their pockets with even more money in the way of bonuses. Is that a fair characterization of what happened?
For the case of Annette Verschaeren's Store in that second COVID payment, in the same few days that she received that second COVID payment, her company was already in the process of getting over $200,000 as part of the regular STTC process. So again, this is a question of knowing better, not just illegally approving funding.
Now, Annette Verschaeren at committee has attempted to justify these improper and conflict-ridden payments on the basis that companies within SDTC's portfolio were badly struggling during COVID and needed emergency funding to survive. But that's not accurate, is it?
SDTC actually did a complete survey of the whole portfolio, which showed that the majority of companies didn't require additional funding, including the majority of the board members' companies, which is why they then went ahead and approved it for everyone, because had they done a more effective job, it wouldn't have given the majority of STTC companies and the board members' companies any money.
How much time?
About 45 seconds.
Okay. I just want to turn very quickly to Ed Vandenberg. He was provided counsel to the SDTC board, notwithstanding the fact that he was a member of the council. Is that correct?
Correct, and he's also conveniently retired.
And he was being remunerated, right?
Correct.
And that would be in violation of the SDTC Act.
Correct.
Did Annette Verschere know of that?
She did.
And what about the Assistant Deputy Minister Noseworthy?
They would all know this.
And presumably Minister Champagne would have known of it as well.
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.